Hi there, my name's Robin Johns and I'm the Knowledge and Training Director here at Cato Networks. You may have heard that we have a Cato Management Application. This is the single point in which customers can configure and monitor their network all at the same time. Now, if this is the start of your educational journey, or if you're just interested to see how people use the tool, you're in luck. In this session, I'll be providing you a walkthrough using a brand new account, so hopefully we can work together. So let's start where we all start, and that's with a login page. Now, customers will log in here, they will come up to their email address, they'll enter their email address, they will log in, and the first thing that will be presented will be this blank instance, this blank page. Now, it shouldn't be blank for long. This is the topology page in which customers can start seeing their users, their sites, and their overall data. But right now, there's nothing there. It's empty, it's blank. So let's create a site. I'm going to move myself out of the way for this. Let's focus just on the technology. But let's go up to Network, the Network tab at the top. And you'll notice that now we've moved to Network that we actually do not have any sites configured. So let's move over to the right and click New. We want to create a new site. Now, the great thing about Cato is that you don't have to have any hardware to site to actually configure and deploy a network. We use a series of logical site creations, which means all of your policies, your network rules, and everything else can be configured within the Cato Management Application before anything arrives to site. All the policies, all of your configuration elements are stored within the cloud, which is great. Let's create a site. The first thing I want to do is give this site a name, and I'm going to call this test site. We can specify the type of site, for example, branch, headquarters, cloud data center, and others, but for now I'll just leave it as a branch. Our connection type includes X1500 and X1700 sockets, which are owned by Cato, or you can have the IPsec connections for IC V1 and V2. Additionally, if you do not want to use any form of hardware or you do not want to use an IPsec connection, we have ESX, AWS, and Azure options available. For this, I'm going to use an X1500 socket. Now, you may have noticed from my accent that I am based in the United Kingdom. So therefore, I will choose country for this site to be in the United Kingdom with the time zone of London. After this, I need to specify the WAN interface settings. So I'm going to say this site has 50 megabits of available upstream and 50 megabytes of available downstream bandwidth. We recommend that you configure this according to your ISP bandwidth. After that, we need to configure a native range. And this is the IP address space which is available behind the socket and advertised across the Cato cloud. This can be whatever you want, but I'm going to enter the CIDR range of 192.168.1.0/24 and click apply. That was a little tricky, hey? A little confusing. Getting sites established is incredibly easy. And as I've mentioned before, you can build multiple sites, multiple branch offices, multiple headquarters, all within this window before you're even ready for rollout. So if it comes to a proof of concept, if it comes to you just getting ready for future expansion and growth, you can do all the work in advance, ensuring that when it comes to actual rollout time, life becomes a little easier for you. So if we return to the monitoring page, we'll now notice that our test site is red. It's connected into the Cato cloud, but not quite. This is because it's disconnected. Now, the next step that you would want to do, or you might want to do, is either configure additional policies and procedures, or you might want to get yourself hardware and connect it and get the site operational. I'm going to start by configuring additional policies, and let's start with network rules. And I'll come up here and click the term network. Now I'm in the network, and you'll notice on the left-hand menu we have the option for network rules, bandwidth management, DHCP, last mile monitoring, and more. But for now, let's just look at the network rules. Let's see how network traffic will be dealt with across the Cato backbone. And you'll notice that the default configurations that have been applied here, we already have rules. We already have WAN voice and video predefined rules, internet voice and video, RDP, and more. These are Cato best practice definitions. These are things that we have identified and we've rolled out automatically to every single customer account. Now, you can edit these. You can edit these very easily. Say if you didn't want this WAN voice and video rule to be applied, You can click on it and you can modify the source of the traffic that this will apply to, or the destination, or which application and categories it applies to. But you'll notice it's all one window. And that's the great thing about Cato. It's all done here. So you don't have to worry about configuring network rules on every appliance around the world. You don't need to worry about looking about regarding where is the regional traffic, how is the traffic flowing, where is the data flowing, because it's all done here. And you'll notice it's not just the source and the destination. We also have applications and categories for stateful aware traffic routing. We can also specify the bandwidth allowances, so priority 10, priority 20, and more. And these are customizable and editable by your users. So if the user wanted to create a network rule or edit an existing one, they can do this already. So if I was to move into this one, let's look at this WAN voice and video one. I'm just going to slightly edit an existing rule, just for the sake of time, not that it takes long. I can see that the source is currently any. But if I was to change this source to maybe a site or system group or subnet, let's choose site, we can now start applying policies to the test site we created a moment ago before anything's deployed. Fantastic! And we'll click apply. Wonderful. Now, if you want more information about network rules, our primary transport information and more, we have lots of documentation on our help center, as well as other videos and material, which you can find on our partner portal or on YouTube. So we have a site configured. Oh, don't forget to click save. Don't forget to click save. So we have a site configured. We have network rules automatically defined. The next thing that you might be concerned before getting a site online and connecting it might be security. And security is a relatively easy thing to establish as well. Let's go to the top of the page, to the navigation bar, and click security. And once we're in security, you'll notice that the default page is an internet firewall. Like the network rules, Cato has an established rule base of predefined rules that we think you might want. For example, we'll block Tor, SMB, and SMTP traffic by default across the Tor network. You don't want people tunneling through your network to get to other things on the other side. We block that by default. We'll look at default block for individual categories, for example, criminal activity, games, school cheating, drugs, spam, and others. So if somebody starts accessing the internet and they try going to coolmathgamesforkids.com or bigdrugs.com, by default, the Cato Internet Firewall will block this, and the users will get a blocked page saying, sorry, you're not allowed it. This is not safe for work content. We do not deem this appropriate. Additionally, we have a prompt category as well, as you'll see here. So if somebody tries to go to cults or anonymizers or gambling websites, they don't just get a big red X block page. They get a prompt. So they'll say, are you sure you want to visit this page? Are you sure you want to access this? And then when the user clicks OK and progresses to that page, there's a record of intent. There's a record of evidence available for you to start tracking. But you'll notice these rules, they're available, but there's something missing. The internet firewall is not turned on. So let's turn on the internet firewall. We click this button and then I click save. Whew, that took a while. Now it's saved. The internet firewall is applied to all users and all sites across the account. So as I start to onboard more users, deploy more sites, and expand the Cato footprint, all of these internet firewall rules will be applied everywhere. If I was to create a new internet firewall rule, let's create a quick one, and I will say this will be block Facebook at test site. Okay, a new one, a new ruled order. The source would be any traffic coming from an IP, a floating subnet or a group or a host or an IP. I'm just going to go for a site. I want to say if any traffic is being observed at the test site using the application or country. Let's go for application. I'll move myself out of the way. Let's say they're trying to go to Facebook across an individual service or report. You can specify for other applications. For here, leave that for any. And the action I'd like to do is block. And once it's blocked, I'd like an event generated. I want an email notification sent weekly. And I want this sent to all of the admins on my Cato account. So weekly, I'd get a digest about who's trying to access Facebook because we've blocked it. Now, this rule can apply all day, every day. We can limit that to our working hours, or you can choose a custom time for when this rule actually applies. Now, this is very useful for the working from home employee because if you don't want them to use Facebook or Netflix or anything similar during working hours, you can limit this. So once 5:30 rolls by and the workday ends, if people are still using corporate devices out in the field, well, I guess you can reward your employees. But it's not for me to come and tell you how to run your network. Instead, I'm just providing the tools for you to make those calls. Now, for this, I'm going to say no time constraint, just to make it look prettier. And I'll click apply. And I'll click save. And quite easily, I have now applied a new firewall rule, a new internet firewall rule to block Facebook at this test site. You can see test site, Facebook, any. So anytime there's a user at this test site, they will now have Facebook blocked. If I wanted to edit this, if I didn't want it to be test site, if I wanted to go in and say, anytime it's a certain subnet or an IP address range or a user, you'll see we don't have any users configured yet. You can start adding individuals to that rule and amending it on the fly. So you don't have to worry about logging into multiple applications, multiple portals, using an orchestration system to start getting all of your individual firewall elements together. It's all done from here. And the propagation time across our global Cato backbone is minimal as well. So you're not waiting 6 to 8 hours for a global push for every database around the world to be updated. No, all of the internet firewall rules are controlled here. But this is just for traffic going to the internet. We've enabled it. Maybe you want to know more about traffic going to the WAN from site to site. Well, in that case, over here, we have a WAN firewall. Looking at the WAN firewall, you'll notice we don't have any default categories. And the reason we don't have any default categories is because we don't know what your WAN is going to look like yet. Your WAN is built by yourself, by adding individual sites, branches, headquarters, cloud data centers, whatever it might be. This gets built. But let's enable the WAN firewall. And enabling the WAN firewall, once again, incredibly complex process of having to find the slider, click the button, and then click save. Very tiring. British sarcasm. So we have WAN firewall enabled. And just like the internet firewall rules, we can start creating rules for this traffic. So we can say anytime, I'll create this called test WAN firewall. We can say any traffic either to or from, so bidirectional, from that site we've just configured, our test site, to anywhere. So we specified the source and the destination. You could say here's an application category, either application. Let's say we wanted to do all advertisements across every port. We wanted that to be allowed. This is a theoretical rule. You can jump into it. But now I'm saying anytime from the test site to any other configured site or user on the network across the WAN, advertisement type applications are now allowed. Now, personally, I wouldn't save this rule. I don't like advertisements. That's just to me. But I know we have a multitude of different customers out there. Some work in advertising, some work in marketing, some work in other type of publication duties. So here's a rule that customers might want to establish. Anything from one site to another site, or anything from one user to an individual site, or a site to everywhere, you can start building your WAN firewall policy rules very easily here. And of course, don't forget to click save. Always forget to click save. Now, that's the basic security. Firewalls. Everybody knows firewalls. So let's move on to the next security. Let's move on to IPS policy. Our IPS, our intrusion prevention system, utilizes over 400 IOC, or indicators of compromised threat feeds, and is updated and maintained by Cato on a daily basis. If you want this configured and you have the license available, all you need to do to turn on your IPS is come here, check that box, and click save. Yay, that was easy. Now, by default, the IPS will scan all network traffic by default, and we specify this in the user interface, and you can see that the default behavior is WAN traffic, both inbound and outbound from the internet. If we identify a malicious file, block it. That's a protection policy. Block that data. If you wanted to change it, you could. It's available to you, but that's the default for the protection policy. Under enforcement options, you can say to quarantine suspicious IPs or block newly registered domains if you're worried about new domains being set up as potential phishing attacks. That can be done here. If you wanted to restrict certain traffic to individual countries, you can do that with geo-restrictions. By creating a new geo-restriction rule, and let's say block UK, for example, you don't want to talk to people in the United Kingdom, we could say any traffic inbound or outbound from the UK, we can start putting those rules. So United Kingdom, actions, block, monitor, or allow. I could say block, and then I could do events and email notifications like we had before. Click apply. And if I was to save this, any traffic now inbound or outbound from United Kingdom IP address ranges or sources, we would now block it. I'm not going to save this rule because I'm in the UK and I'll end up blocking myself. So I'll just delete the rule by coming over here, clicking the 3 dots, and then just deleting that rule. Yes, please. But you can see it's very easy to start controlling the flow of data through a geo-restriction. Or additionally, we have an allow list where you can start allowing individual IP addresses, signatures, or other IDs. But effectively, this is the IPS policy. And the IPS has lesser controls than you may have seen with other vendors because you have to do less. You don't have to worry about configuring, deploying, maintaining, managing, iterating, and also verifying that everything is turned on and working. All you need to do is come here, you need to change that little toggle, and Cato is then automatically patching, updating, securing, and protecting you for any exploits that we identify. Now, sometimes people try and download files from the internet. They try and install potentially unwanted programs, malware, or others. In that case, you can come down here to our anti-malware section. Yes, unified threat protection. And we have 2 options. We have anti-malware and next-gen anti-malware. Our anti-malware engine will start scanning files for known signatures. Our next-generation anti-malware will start doing more heuristic analysis and more deep dive next-generation stuff. So by enabling both of those and coming over here to click save, we have now turned on our anti-malware engines. So any files that are going across the Cato cloud, any files that are being downloaded from somebody else, or people attempting to access those file shares, which the internet is full of, we're now scanning all of these data. We're now looking at the potential harm, the potential risk, the potential damage that this could do to your network. And what with the anti-malware, the IPS, and the WAN firewalls running out of the box, there's a lot of things that are automatically blocked and automatically identified. And without you having to do much at all, your network is now secured. Now, is your network fully secured? No. Realistically, security is a constantly evolving, ever-present thing that you always have to focus on. But now we have enabled it all. It's up and running. From here, you would start to tweak your profiles. You would start to look at what sites and what applications you would like to traverse the internet. You will want to start to understand which domains that you would like to give visibility to, or start to plan out your actual network configuration. But we've done all this without actually having any hardware to site. We just have a single logical site. We can start applying rules to this. We can start building the unified threat protection around sites which don't actually exist in production yet. Which means that if you are talking with a vendor and the vendor saying that there's going to be several hundred days lead time for LAN hardware, you can start doing the groundwork today. Very, very easily. Now, an additional great thing about how Cato operates is that it's not just sites that are easy to configure. There's also users that are easy to configure. And to do that, I'll create a new remote user. I'll come up here to the Access tab. The Access tab, you'll notice we have a user configured here. This is a chap called Robin Johns. I wouldn't trust that guy, but we have him in the system. So I'll remove him. I'll click this button. I will decide to delete, and let's remove him. And let's add him again. I will come here. I'll click new. We'd give somebody, we'll say, here's your first name. Hey, Robin Johns, and I'll enter Robin Johns at catonetworks.com. I want to add this as a user. And I click apply. Now, this email address will receive an email in their inbox saying, hey, we would like you to configure, we would like you to come and join Cato, and within a few seconds, you can get them up and running and connected to your corporate network. While I'm waiting for the email to come through, let's go run through a few of the other options we have here. Now, I've shown you how to configure a user individually. Just one user. This is a very manual process, but you might want to look at your directory services instead. If you're currently using SCIM or LDAP, lightweight domain connections, you can start doing the automatic connections through here. If you wanted to start provisioning users, not through invitation emails, but we want to send registration codes instead, you can do it as well. There's a lot of flexibility with how you can onboard new users, and the integration of directory services or domains makes it a lot easier for you to manage. We integrate with vendors such as Okta and Microsoft Azure, as well as others, to ensure that your user groups are automatically imported in a very easy way. Nice and simple, nice and easy. We'll also notice on the left-hand side for access, we have things such as browser. So I'm clicking OK, I haven't made any changes. We can start seeing browser access for a clientless SDP or a clientless portal. You can start configuring how your users connect or get upgraded. You can start configuring single sign-on parameters. For example, if you want to use Microsoft credentials to authenticate your users to this portal, we can do that. We have the idea of user awareness, where we can synchronize your IP addresses for users and Active Directory information to start putting host identity around observed traffic. And you can also start authenticating connections through MAC addresses. So only specific MAC addresses that you've approved can connect to your corporate network. And all of this is done through this Access tab. Monitoring? Well, that's going to be monitoring. I've got other YouTube videos out there to show you what things look like when you're 3 months, 6 months into monitoring. So we don't really have much to monitor yet. We don't really have any traffic. But under the network, you can start configuring your network data. You can start configuring your DHCP settings. You can start looking at floating ranges, DNS settings, your IP allocation. Well, actually, IP allocation is an interesting one. You know, if you wanted to have a static IP address used from Cato, you can do that. For example, if I choose Amsterdam, quite easily, quite simply, I have chosen Amsterdam. I've now clicked save, and now this IP address will always be served to me if I route traffic through Amsterdam. And quite easily, I can create a new network rule to say any traffic coming out of the world for Amsterdam will impact here. I show that right now. For example, network rule. Here's internet WAN, internet voice and video predefined. If I wanted to say any type of this can be routed a certain way, we could say any internet voice and video traffic. We can route that via, move me out of the way. You can now route that via an individual Cato point of presence, or alternatively, this new IP address. Ooh, lovely. If I was to apply this, I've now quite simply allocated myself a static public IP address on the Cato backbone, and now I'm saying anytime that internet voice and video is observed anywhere across Cato, either users or sites, going to the internet, that traffic will be routed via Amsterdam and will have the egress IP address of 85.255.20.28. How long would that take with the other vendors? How long would it take you to get an IP address and apply this to an application-aware network rule to enforce consistency of connection? Very good question. Very difficult. I wonder if you have the answer. I'm not going to save this. Should I save this? Yeah, let's save this. Ooh, let's save that right now. So, actually, I haven't set the active TCP acceleration. So for now, let's move away. TCP acceleration is something for a future session. So let's cancel away. So we have bandwidth management. We can start throttling what percentage of traffic is allocated to individual queues. We can start looking at DHCP settings. You can start looking at connection SLAs to identify what is the observed or what's the appropriate packet loss and latency values between your users or your sites and the Cato point of presence before things will start to reconnect. For example, if we start to see greater than 10% packet loss, connect to a new POP. Or if we have an average latency greater than 300 milliseconds, we can do dynamic distribution. But luckily, we also have Cato Smart SLA thresholds to start showing you where is the best place to connect, and you don't have to do anything. The Cato sockets, the Cato users, automatically connect to the best point of presence, however it might be. So there's a lot. I know time is running short, but effectively we have a lot of power through this console. Just in a few seconds, we have created users. We've created sites. We now have floating ranges, DNS settings. We have access credentials. We have security. We have categories that you can configure. And all of this is done directly through this interface. Now, what's the next step? Connecting hardware. Now, connecting hardware is very, very easy. If you've ever seen one of these little boxes, here's an example. Here's an X1500 socket, which is currently being green screened out. Hey! But this is all I need to connect my branch office into one of the Cato clouds. And you might be wondering, how do I connect that? Well, I'll show you. Well, the first thing that you need to do is plug it in. When you receive one of the sockets in the mail, you'll have a box to unbox. But unlike other vendors, you don't have to worry about serial cables and console cables and a bag of Lego carrying around with you. Not at all. What happens instead is you get one of these boxes and you plug the WAN cable into the WAN port number 3. It's identified. And then you plug the power cable into the socket as well. Once you have the socket plugged in with power and WAN, it automatically will try and acquire an IP address via DHCP and talk to the Cato cloud. And once it connects to the Cato cloud, well, it automatically starts kicking into life. A few moments ago, I just connected it in the socket, and you'll notice in the top right hand corner, the notifications bell has an orange mark. By clicking that, you'll notice that there's a few notifications. It says, hey, a new socket was identified with this MAC address from this IP address. Great. The socket is being upgraded and provisioned for first-time configuration. Wonderful. So I've just plugged it in. That's all I've done. I've just plugged it in, nothing else. After doing that, it says that, oh, we would like to activate this socket. Would you like to assign this socket to a site? And I will say, yes, please. Yes, please. I want to assign this socket to test site. You can see currently it doesn't have any sockets assigned. So I'll do that. Great. And you'll also notice a notification saying the socket was automatically updated from version 11 to version 13 with the serial number. Now, my effort that I've had to put in is one Ethernet cable and one 12-volt DC connector. It's pretty lightweight for me. The Cato Cloud has automatically identified the socket, it's automatically upgraded the socket, it's maintained it, and I've just said I would like this to be connected into this site. Quite easy. So if I was to look at the sites, so for example, click on network, you'll see currently it's in the provisioning phase, but in a few moments, this will be connected in and then we'll have full access. Generally, it takes a few seconds on the first iteration to get the socket up and running, but the overall user effort required is very, very minimal. So you just plug it in and it works. And in the event that Cato starts releasing new versions of the socket firmware, well, we just automatically upgrade it for you as well. It's very simple. It's very easy. Under the network settings, oh, there we go. It's now connected. We're now starting to see a connection. If I to look at this test site and click on test site, eventually we'll start getting metrics here. Network analytics, throughput, upstream, downstream, packet loss, hosts, distance, jitter, and more. But if I wanted to start seeing what is happening right now, well, maybe I can choose the real-time analytics. And the real-time analytics will open an active connection between the Cato Management Application and the socket for you to start seeing some data in real time. Currently, you'll see that we're having very little traffic coming through for average throughput because I don't have any hosts connected on the LAN side, but we can now start seeing the distance. What is the real-time round trip time, say that 10 times fast. We're now starting to see the distance between the socket and the Cato point of presence for real-time, real-life monitoring. So I know we're nearing the 30-minute mark right now, but let me just recap what we've been through. In this past 30 minutes, we have configured a site. We've enabled an internet firewall and a WAN firewall. We've enabled IPS protections, anti-malware, next-gen anti-malware, and actively deployed a site. The next thing I could do right now is get a computer, get a host, get a Wi-Fi access point, connect it to the back of this socket, and have people able to use the internet. The default WAN firewall rules means that my children won't be able to access any hacking or not safe for work content because the Cato firewall's automatically blocking it. And all of this is available out of the box. Now just imagine where you will be 6 months from now, after playing with Cato and really understanding the tool and being able to demonstrate it. Compared to other vendors, establishment, deployment with Cato is ridiculously simple. The maintenance of Cato is very, very low as well, because we're a service-oriented company, not a product-based company. We're delivering excellence on our backbone, not just by upgrading our infrastructure and architecture, but also by adding additional features and functions and IPS protections and many, many more. This is just the nature of a service company. So I'm going to kind of bring this to a close now, and I know there's a lot of features that we haven't covered whatsoever. But hopefully by this time, you should start to have an understanding of how easy it is to work with Cato, not just for initial onboarding, but constant future work as well. So thank you for your time all. I've appreciated it. Until next one, stay safe and be well. Bye for now.